roller coasters, whether they're big or small. For millions of thrill seekers across the globe each year, there is no substitute for the adrenaline of a coaster. In this series, we will take a deeper look into some of the latest, the greatest, and the not so great roller coasters that the world has to offer. And of course, after all of that, we will ride the roller coaster and provide you with our opinion. That's why we took a trip to Alton Towers Resort in Staffordshire, England, where the latest roller coaster to be built in the UK has just opened. Wicker Man. Quite clearly, the first thing you'll notice about Wicker Man is that it's made out of wood. This is actually the first wooden roller coaster to be built in the UK since Megaphobia at Oakwood in 1996. This is obviously disregarding the fact that the Scenic Railway at Dreamland in Margate was rebuilt in 2015 after it was heavily damaged in a fire. But did you know that this isn't the first time that Alton Towers has attempted to build a wooden roller coaster? In 2003, back when Alton Towers was part of the Tussauds Group, a gargantuan wooden roller coaster designed by the legendary John Wardley was proposed to the planning authorities. Dubbed the Cross Valley Coaster by enthusiasts due to the fact that the ride would cross the huge valley in the middle of the park between the Dark Forest and Forbidden Valley areas. The valley was key to this potential wooden coaster, as Alton Towers is restricted by strict planning regulations, which state that they cannot build excessively above tree height. This coaster was a typical out and back style woody, and would have featured several drops of over 200 feet, thanks primarily to the coaster crossing the valley, as alluded to earlier. This would have no doubt been one of the highlights of the ride. Unfortunately, shortly after the plans were released into the public domain, a huge outcry from the local residents and media meant that the plans were eventually rejected and scrapped, and the long wait for a wooden coaster at Alton Towers continued. That was until April 2016, when finally new plans for a wooden roller coaster at Alton Towers were submitted. The plans were approved in August of the same year, and work would then begin on bringing the ride that would eventually become Wicker Man to life. Wicker Man is a Great Coasters International roller coaster, an American company which specialise in creating highly twisted, fast-paced wooden roller coasters. Some other coasters from the company that you may have heard of, or even ridden, include Gwazi at Busch Gardens Tampa, Wodan at Europa Park, and Mystic Timbers at Kings Island. The ride itself sits on the former site of the Flume and is in its own section of the park near the Mutiny Bay area. As you can tell already, Wicker Man is vastly different in scale and design to the Cross Valley Coaster plans from 2003, with the ride's biggest drop being just 72 feet. Wicker Man is also quite compact, with the vast majority of the ride taking place around the main centrepiece, a 57-foot tall Wicker Man effigy, which smokes and bursts with fire each time the train passes through. The roller coaster reaches a top speed of 44 miles per hour and keeps a decent pace along the 2,028 feet of track. It was due to open on Saturday the 17th of March 2018, however, poor weather conditions delayed the opening. Eventually, Wicker Man would soft open to the public on Tuesday the 20th of March 2018, and officially would open on Saturday the 24th of March. Contrary to some belief, despite the name Wicker Man, there is no affiliation between this roller coaster and the two films with the title The Wicker Man. So unfortunately, there will be no bees here. The story of the ride centres around a tribe known as the Bjornen, whose lifestyle denounces modern technology, striving for simpler times. The queue line for Wicker Man is primarily outside, with a few small scenery items scattered about. such as plenty of good old-fashioned bunting and some eerie-looking wicker sculptures in the shape of runes from the Bjornen's own alphabet. The main draw to the queue line is the fantastic views of the roller coaster that can be seen whilst waiting. The queue weaves and snakes past and under most of the ride structure, so you'll not be short of things to look at. Some wait later and you will enter inside a building. This is where you drop off any bags you have with a staff member. Then you wait to be led into a circular room where the pre-show for the ride takes place. If you wish to go onto the ride blind, please skip to the next part.
Welcome, chosen few. We of Bjorn. For hundreds of years, our family has lived in these woods, led by the spirit of the Wicker Man. The elders told us of a day when he would rise to give us freedom and eternal well-being. But to start that ritual, we must present him with a gift. And that gift is you. You and the flame. It is time. He is here. What an honor to see yourself bound in wicker, encased in his soul. And you see yourself in him. The time has come for the Wickerman to rise. Together, we shall heed the flame. Let the ceremony commence.
The doors then open and you enter the station. The station is covered in wicker with some red lighting to invoke feelings of fire and warmth. Wickerman uses the typical Millennium Flyer trains used by Great Coasters International and features 2 abreast seating with a 12 cars per train, making a total of 24 riders at a time. There is no front row exclusive queue for Wickerman, so most of the time you will be sat where the ride operative tells you to sit. Then you sit in your seat, pull down your lap bar, and your ride on Wickerman begins. After you exit, you have the chance to pick up any bags or items left at the baggage drop. You then walk into the Wickerman shop, which is highly themed and has many new items of merchandise that can be bought, including a £3,000 giant Wickerman statue. Now it's time to give my opinion on Wickerman at Alton Towers. Wickerman marks the 10th coaster from Great Coasters International that I have ridden, and whilst I'm not a huge fan of GCI, I am willing to give any roller coaster a chance. The coaster starts off reasonably well with the John Wardley redesigned first drop, providing some decent airtime in the back rows. As the ride progresses, however, the experience does not. The first hill in the sound tunnel tries to give a moment of airtime, but ultimately falls short of providing too much sensation. Then you head into the more typically GCI section of the coaster, plenty of banking and fast-paced action. The long sweeping left-handed corner as you pass through the Wickerman structure for the first time provides plenty of lateral forces, which can feel pretty unnatural, especially considering the amount the ride is actually banked at this point. You fly up through the Wickerman and into the overbanked turnaround. This does absolutely nothing for me except slow the pacing down. A couple of little bunny hops again try to give you a moment of airtime, but they're just there to tease you as you head through the Wickerman structure for the second time. It's also worth mentioning here that the fire effects are very much for the off-ride viewing spectacle as opposed to on-ride, because you will not notice the fire whilst riding for the first time. The only thing you will notice is getting smacked in the face with steam and water. There are some more banked corners providing a few more points of lateral G-force before we reach what is known as the boring corner, which may be an ode to classic wooden roller coasters which were built before the ability to bank properly came about. Or perhaps the designers just couldn't think of how to reach the next section of the ride, so just dumped a corner there. You exit Boring Corner into what appears to be a proper airtime hill. But once again, Wickerman flatters to deceive, and you may get a tiny bit of floater airtime, but nothing substantial. You pass through the structure for the final time round a moderately banked corner, and then meander back around until the train hits the brakes. Also disappointing is the lack of anything interesting happening once the train enters the pitch-black maintenance shed. Some sound effects and smoke machines on the final turn around a side. There is nothing, which makes the story to the ride feel incomplete. My biggest gripe with the ride, however, is the theme itself. Whilst the ride has some absolutely excellent theming, and I'm delighted to finally see a proper pre-show to a roller coaster at a Merlin park, the roller coaster is clearly aimed at being more family oriented, and yet Wicker Man features a theme involving human sacrifice. How is that appropriate? That said, it sounds like I absolutely hated the ride, but I didn't. The coaster itself is solid enough without having any particular standout moments, possibly the first drop in the back row if I were pushed to pick a highlight. Some of the theming is joyous, the giant Wickerman structure and the station being my favourite bits. And finally having a pre-show is fantastic to have. It's also not too long, so it shouldn't be too annoying on re-rides. It certainly looks like it will be a hit with park goers, and I hope it is, because the UK needs more wooden roller coasters, and the more people that visit Alton Towers to ride Wicker Man, the more likely a bigger, better wooden roller coaster will be built at some point in the future. Overall, I would give Wicker Man a 6.5 out of 10. If I were rating it purely on the coaster itself, it would be a distinctly average 5 out of 10. But as a package, despite the inappropriate theme, it's still a thoroughly enjoyable experience and gets a ratings boost because of it. Have you been on Wicker Man yet? What did you make of it? Let us know in the comment section below. Also, if you have any suggestions on what roller coaster or ride we should review next, please let us know. Icon is already planned for anyone wondering. Thank you for watching this video. We hope you enjoyed it, and goodbye for now.